We're going to be talking about things that can trigger us in a difficult conversation. I don't know if you've ever had the experience where somebody tells you something about you and they think you know this about you and you don't know this about you. So that happened to me recently. I'd bought a new computer, and along with the computer you could buy some tutorials, and the tutorials were going to help you set it all up and make it all run perfectly and all of these things. So I did all that, and then that evening I had a friend over and I was telling her about the computer and the tutorials, and she said, "Oh my gosh, that's so great. You're not going to be a computer loser anymore." And I looked at her and I said, "Am I a computer loser?" And she said, No, not a loser. It's just from now on, you're going to be a computer winner." So I use that as an example of a situation where I was perfectly fine in that conversation because I'm not attached to being a computer winner. In fact, I think I know inside me I am a computer loser. So when she said that, it didn't trigger me. But if I'd been attached to, if I'd thought that I was really good on the computer and suddenly I'm being called a computer loser, that could trigger me. Now, I think we all know that if somebody says something that feels like a personal attack, and being called a loser for some might constitute a personal attack, that could potentially trigger us. What I think is less clear for many of us is that there are other things that can trigger us which don't come out quite that way, not so much like a personal attack. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask you to think about what are some things that you're good at, some of your best qualities. So it may be that you're very creative, or it may be that you're really compassionate, or you're spontaneous, or you're very well organized, or whatever it is. So just start to think about some of the things that you're good at. And you can also start thinking about what are some of your values, what are some of the things that are important to you. So some people really value honesty. Some people really place value on hard work or on giving back to the community. So these are certain values. You may have certain needs that you can think about. And when you pull those things together, it gives you a sense of yourself. And we all have a sense of self. So I'll use myself as an example. I might like to see myself as being competent and caring and respectful. So I'm attached to those things about myself, as you are attached to the things about yourself. And chances are, by this age and stage, we've got a pretty clear sense of what we're good at and what our values are because we've been out in the world doing all these things for some time. The beauty of this exercise is, even if we're hopelessly delusional about what we're good at, even if we're completely wrong-headed, it still works. And it works like this. I asked you to think about what are some of your best qualities, what are some values for you, and we could take the heading, My 5 Best Qualities, and cross it out and replace it with My 5 Key Triggers. And by that I mean, if I like to think of myself as being competent and caring and respectful, and somebody gives me feedback or says something to me that suggests I've been incompetent or uncaring or disrespectful, that's going to be triggering for me because it's going to conflict with my sense of myself. And in that situation, when I've been triggered, I'm going to do what many people do. I might resist the information, so I might say, that's not true. I wasn't incompetent. Or I might attack back and say, I'm not incompetent, you're incompetent. You're the person who gave me the bad research, or whatever it is. So I've been triggered, and now I'm either defending or attacking, and neither of those things are going to help us in a difficult conversation. So we need to identify what might be some of our own triggers. We also need to recognize that people's sense of themselves varies dramatically. So I said at the beginning that this exercise works even if you're hopelessly delusional. So I might think I'm the world's best ballerina. And as I'm sure is clear to you, I'm not. But the idea is, if I think it about myself, even if it's clear to all of you that that can't possibly be the case, if you say something to me that suggests it's not the case, that could trigger me because I think that I am. So that, even if it's not accurate objectively, for me it's accurate internally, and the comments are going to hurt my feelings or trigger me in some way or another. So we need to be mindful of that. Now, the other thing that we need to be mindful of is people's sense of themselves vary dramatically from person to person. So I've said that I'm attached to being competent and caring and respectful. I am completely unattached to my ability to cook a decent meal. I despite years of effort, I cannot produce a consistently decent meal. So if I invite friends over for dinner and I produce what one of my friends calls a suboptimal meal, so I produce a meal that's really not that good, I'm going to feel badly. I'm going to pour more wine. I'm going to try to order us in some new food. Like, I'm going to try to take things in hand. But my sense of myself isn't going to be under attack because I'm not attached to cooking a decent meal. Someone else, a world-class chef, would feel very differently about the same experience because they have a different identity. So, what does this tell us about difficult conversations? The first thing is it teaches us that we need to pay attention not only to things that will obviously trigger us, like being attacked, but also what are some of the key elements of our identity, some of our core values, because those things may also leave us open to being triggered if somebody gives us feedback that suggests we haven't honored those things or done those things. We also want to be aware of places within ourselves and others where certain aspects of our identity may come into conflict. So a classic example of that would be, many people like to see themselves as being a good parent who's available to their child and goes to special events. And they also see themselves as being a good employee who's going to stay late if work needs to be done, or a good team player who's going to pitch in when a problem arises. And maybe there's a particular day where they've made arrangements to go and see their child at a special event at the school, and something comes up at work and they're expected to stay and be a team player. And suddenly those two parts of their personality are in conflict. So we need to look for those places because that can be a situation that can create conflict for us. We also need to try to develop for ourselves a balanced sense of self. So a balanced sense of self says, I'm a competent person, and sometimes competent people make mistakes. Or caring people sometimes do things that hurt other people's feelings. Or good parents sometimes miss events at the school. Good team workers sometimes have to leave for personal reasons. So you just develop a balanced sense of self so that if you're in a situation and somebody's giving you feedback or saying something that may feel like it could be attacking your sense of yourself, you can manage it because it's just part of your identity. You can say, okay, I made a mistake there, but that doesn't mean I'm incompetent. And because you can take the information and you're not defending yourself, you're not attacking back, you can do what you need to do to correct the situation. You can apologize, you can correct your mistake, you can learn from it going forward. And so you've used it rather than having an identity crisis. What it means in terms of other people's identity is I need to pay attention in a conversation to try to avoid triggering the other person's identity, not to make personal attacks, not to say things that might land for them as attacking them personally. And if they lose their sense of balance, and typically we know that because they start to take things personally, we can try to be clear that I'm not trying to say this is about you as a whole person, I'm just trying to identify this particular behavior as being problematic. Okay? So, we want to be mindful of everyone has an identity, know what yours is because it may make you vulnerable to being triggered, try to be attentive to what other people's identity issues might be, try to avoid triggering them, and to the degree that either person gets triggered, try to regain your balance by just developing a balanced sense of self. I hope those ideas will be helpful for you, and I hope you enjoy your future conversations, and I hope they're not too difficult.